My mom demanded I give her my influencer money. I refused, and she ruined my life. My mom demanded I give her my influencer money. I refused, and she ruined my life. The first sign that my world was about to burn down wasn't a bang, but a ping. A single, innocuous-sounding email notification on my phone while I was live, in the middle of a boss fight with 20,000 people watching. The subject line read, "Urgent inquiry regarding your professional conduct." And in that moment, I knew. The person who had spent years mocking my stupid little video game hobby had just decided to destroy the empire I'd built with my own two hands. And that person was my mom. Let me set the scene for you. My name is Leo, and for the better part of a decade, my mother, Brenda, treated my passion for gaming like a communicable disease. It wasn't just a gentle disapproval, it was an active, relentless campaign of belittlement. While other kids' parents were buying them consoles, mine were hiding the power cord to our family computer. Every report card with a B+ was met with the same sigh and the same refrain. If you spent half as much time on your schoolwork as you did on those idiotic games, you'd be a straight-A student. The words were like little pebbles, thrown over and over until they'd worn a groove in my soul. My room wasn't a sanctuary, it was a battlefield. The sound of my keyboard clicking was a declaration of war. I'd hear her footsteps in the hallway, a heavy, judgmental stomp that always seemed to pause outside my door. She'd never knock, just stand there, a silent, disapproving presence. I learned to play with headphones on, not just to hear the game better, but to drown out the sound of her disappointment. To her, I wasn't just wasting time, I was actively choosing failure. I was choosing a life of sloth and insignificance, and every hour I spent streaming to a handful of viewers was another nail in the coffin of my potential. After high school, the pressure intensified. College was the only acceptable path, a real degree, a real job. Anything else was a personal failure on my part, a reflection of her poor parenting. I enrolled in a local community college to placate her, but my heart was never in it. My real education was happening online. I was learning video editing, graphic design, community management, and marketing. I was sinking every dollar from my part-time job at a grocery store into better equipment, a faster internet connection, a new microphone. My mom saw these purchases not as investments in my future, but as proof of my delusion. "You spent $500 on a chair? A chair? Leo, cuts a month's rent. For what? To sit on your ass more efficiently?" The turning point wasn't a single event, but a slow, creeping tide of success. A highlight clip of mine went viral on a gaming forum. My viewer count, which had languished in the low double digits for years, suddenly spiked to 1,000, then 5,000. A small energy drink company reached out and offered me a couple of $100s to put their logo on my stream overlay. It was the first time I'd ever earned a single cent from my idiotic hobby. I remember the feeling of seeing that PayPal notification, a validation so profound it felt like a physical warmth spreading through my chest. From there, things snowballed. The community grew. The sponsorships got bigger. The energy drink deal led to a headset deal, which led to a chair deal, the very chair my mom had mocked. Within 2 years, I was making more money than my parents. I moved out of their house and into a decent 2-bedroom apartment in the city, a place that was my fortress, a place where the only footsteps outside my door belonged to me. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very thing she had tried to stamp out of me was the thing that gave me my independence. And that's when her tune began to change. It wasn't sudden. It was a gradual, unnerving shift. The mocking stopped. In its place came a strange, cloying curiosity. She'd start her phone calls with, "So, how's the streaming going?" The word streaming still sounded foreign and distasteful in her mouth, but the question itself was new. She'd watch my streams, or at least she claimed she did. She'd comment on my nice setup, or tell me that a friend's son was a big fan of mine. It felt like a predator circling, trying to find a weak spot in the fence. I was waiting for the other shoe to drop, but I never could have predicted how hard it would fall, or how completely it would shatter the life I had so carefully built. The final confrontation happened over a seemingly innocent Sunday dinner at her house. The smell of roast chicken filled the air, a deceptive aroma of domesticity. As she served me a plate, she put a hand on my shoulder, a gesture that felt less like affection and more like a brand. She smiled, but her eyes were cold and calculating. "Leo," she said, her voice sweet as poison, "now that you're so successful, we need to talk about how you're going to start giving back to this family. I think 50% of your income is a fair place to start." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. 50%? The number hung in the air between us, absurd and monstrous. I stared at her, searching her face for some sign that this was a joke, a piece of dark familial humor I was somehow failing to understand. But there was no humor there, only a stark, unwavering entitlement. My fork clattered against my plate, the sound unnaturally loud in the sudden silence of the dining room. My father, David, a man who had spent our entire lives deferring to my mother's will, simply stared down at his own plate, a prisoner in his own home. My mind raced, trying to process the logic. It wasn't a loan request. It wasn't for a specific emergency need. It was a demand, a tithe. She saw my success not as something I had earned through years of grinding, of sleepless nights, of teaching myself a dozen different skills, but as a family resource that she was entitled to tap. I thought about the $500 chair, the new computer I'd built piece by piece, the thousands I'd spent on software and advertising. I thought about the taxes, the self-employment tax that was a brutal bite out of every check. I thought about my rent, my utilities, my health insurance, all things I paid for myself from the income she now wanted to claim half of. I tried to explain it to her, my voice dangerously calm. I laid it all out. I wasn't an employee getting a net paycheck. I was a business. My gross income wasn't my take-home pay. I had expenses, taxes, and I needed to save for the future because the life of an influencer was notoriously volatile. Today's top streamer could be tomorrow's forgotten footnote. I wasn't just sitting on a pile of cash. I was reinvesting in my own survival. She listened to my explanation with a look of growing impatience, as if I were speaking a foreign language. Her reasoning, when she finally laid it out, was a masterpiece of emotional blackmail. It wasn't about the money she claimed, it was about respect, about gratitude. "I am your mother," she said, her voice rising with indignation. "I sacrificed for you. I put a roof over your head, food on the table. And now that you've made it, you turn your back on us? You live in your fancy apartment while we're still here. This money isn't just yours, Leo. It's family money. It's the money I deserve for putting up with all those years of you wasting your life." The phrase "wasting your life" hit me like a physical blow. All the years of mockery, all the belittling comments were being retroactively reframed as her noble suffering. She hadn't been trying to crush my spirit, she had been investing in me, and now it was time to collect her dividend. The sheer audacious hypocrisy of it all left me breathless. I realized in that moment that this wasn't a negotiation, it was a shakedown. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I couldn't give in. To give her that money wouldn't be an act of generosity. It would be an admission that she was right, that I owed her for my own success, that my life, my work, my very existence was still her property to command. I looked her directly in the eye and said the one word she was not prepared to hear. No. The reaction was instantaneous and terrifying. The veneer of sweet reason cracked and fell away, revealing a roiling core of pure, unadulterated rage. Her face contorted, her cheeks flushing a deep mottled red. She didn't shout, that would have been too normal. Instead, she began to hiss, a low, venomous sound. She called me ungrateful, a selfish little bastard, a mistake she would rectify. She said I had forgotten where I came from. She slammed her hand on the table, making the silverware jump. My father flinched but said nothing. I stood up, my own dinner untouched. The air was thick with hatred. I knew there was nothing more to say. I walked out of the house, leaving the sound of her sputtering fury behind me. The drive back to my apartment was a blur of streetlights and adrenaline. I felt a profound sense of dread, a premonition that this wasn't the end of the fight. It was just the opening salvo. Later that night, as I was trying to decompress, scrolling mindlessly through social media, I saw it. A new post on her public Facebook page. It was a picture of me as a teenager, acne-scarred and awkward, sitting in front of an old CRT monitor. The caption read, "So proud of the man my son is becoming. It's a shame when success makes some people forget the family who supported them." And the first comment from my aunt was, "He needs to remember his roots." That Facebook post was the first shot across the bow. It was a masterclass in passive aggression, designed to make me look like the villain to our entire extended family and social circle. The comments section quickly became a digital kangaroo court. Aunts, uncles, old family friends, people I hadn't seen in years all weighed in. "You need to respect your mother, Leo. She's always been there for you. Don't let this internet stuff go to your head." Each notification was a tiny paper cut, and I was bleeding from 1,000 of them. I felt like I was being gaslit on a massive scale. She had constructed a narrative where I was the ungrateful, egotistical son who had struck it rich and abandoned his poor, loving mother. And the worst part was, people were buying it. I tried to fight back, at first. I posted a calm, neutral response, something about how there were private family matters being discussed publicly and that I hoped we could resolve them respectfully. She deleted my comment within minutes. Then she posted another picture, this one of my father and me at a Little League game, decades ago. The caption was even more pointed. "Some things are more important than money, like family. I hope my son remembers that before it's too late." The campaign was relentless. She was weaponizing nostalgia and familial obligation, turning my own history against me. Then the doxing began, subtly at first. It started with a proud mom post featuring a picture of the exterior of my apartment building. The caption was innocent enough. "Look at this great place my son is all on his own, so independent." But I knew what she was doing. She was giving my location to anyone who cared to look. My stomach churned. My address wasn't public, but the building was now. It was a breach of my safety, a violation of the sanctuary I had built for myself. A few days later, she posted a picture from a nice little coffee shop she'd discovered near my place. It was the cafe I went to every morning. She was mapping my life, my routines, and putting them on public display for her audience and mine. The private messages started flooding in, not just from family, but from strangers, people who had seen her posts and tracked down my profiles. They ranged from concern trolling, "Are you okay, sweetie? Your mom seems so worried," to outright threats. "You should be ashamed of yourself, treating your mother like that. I hope you lose all your money, you ungrateful punk." My own community, my followers, were starting to see the posts too. Questions began to pop up in my stream chat. "Leo, is everything okay with your family? Who's Brenda on Facebook?" I had to start banning people, which only made me look like I was hiding something. The narrative was spinning further and further out of my control. I felt like I was living in a fishbowl. Every time I left my apartment, I was looking over my shoulder. Every time a new car parked on my street, my heart would pound. I tried calling her, but she had blocked my number. I tried emailing her, but the messages bounced back. She had created a wall of silence around herself while continuing to broadcast her twisted version of events to the world. She was systematically isolating me, turning my own community against me, and making me feel like a prisoner in my own life. The stress was immense. I was losing sleep, losing weight. My streams, which had always been my happy place, were now filled with anxiety. I was constantly on edge, waiting for the next attack. And then the next attack came, not from Facebook, but from my professional inbox. It was an email from my biggest sponsor, the headset company. The subject line was a formal, chilling sentence that made my blood run cold. "Urgent, regarding our partnership and recent concerns." I clicked on the email with a trembling hand. The language was corporate and sterile, but the message was brutally clear. They had been contacted by a concerned party regarding my personal character and off-platform behavior. The email stated that they had received information and documentation suggesting I was not a positive brand ambassador. They were pausing all current and future campaigns pending an internal review. I didn't need to ask who the concerned party was. My mother had escalated her war from the family living room to my corporate boardroom. Panic, cold and sharp, shot through me. This wasn't just about public shaming anymore. This was a direct assault on my livelihood. I immediately started checking my other sponsors: the energy drink company, the gaming chair manufacturer, the snack food brand. One by one, I found the same story. Either a formal email like the first one, or, more insidiously, just a sudden, silent ghosting. Scheduled social media posts were canceled. Contracted streams were quietly removed from their calendars. She was on a rampage, a one-woman wrecking ball armed with a mother's supposed moral authority and a cache of embarrassing childhood photos. I managed to get one of my sponsor contacts on the phone, a guy I had a good relationship with. He was sympathetic but bound by corporate policy. He couldn't tell me who contacted them, but he hinted at the nature of the accusations. Apparently, my mother had spun a compelling tale. I was a gaming addict who was emotionally unstable. I had abandoned my family in their time of need. She had even framed my refusal to give her money as me being financially abusive. To top it all off, she had sent them the very same awkward teenage photos she'd posted on Facebook, presenting them as evidence of my immaturity and unprofessionalism. She was using my own past as a weapon against my future. The professional fallout was immediate and devastating. Within a week, 80% of my income had vanished. The community, which had been a source of strength, was now turning into a source of paranoia. The rumors on Reddit and Twitter were getting louder. Did you hear Leo got dropped by Brand X? I heard he's a jerk to his family. Something weird is going on. He's been super off his game lately. I was caught in a perfect storm. I couldn't defend myself publicly without airing my family's dirty laundry, which would only make me look more unprofessional. But my silence was being interpreted as guilt. My mother had expertly backed me into a corner where any move I made was the wrong one. The financial pressure was immense. My rent, my bills, my business expenses, they didn't just disappear because my sponsors did. I was burning through my savings at an alarming rate. The stress was affecting my work. My streams, once energetic and fun, were now tense and distracted. I was constantly watching the chat, dreading the next question about my sponsors or my mom. I felt like I was drowning, and the person holding my head under the water was the woman who was supposed to love me the most. One evening, I decided I had to try and push through it. I needed the income from the stream, and I needed to feel normal, even for just a few hours. I put on a brave face, queued up my game, and went live. For the first hour, it was okay. I focused on the game, on the chat, on the routine. I was starting to feel a sliver of my old self. Then, a donation notification popped up on the screen. It was for $5, a typical amount. But the message attached to it wasn't typical. It wasn't a "Hi from Brazil" or a "You got this." It was my full name and my home address, followed by a simple, terrifying sentence: "Your mom says hi." The world went silent. The game, the chat, the sound of my own breathing, it all faded into a dull roar. I stared at the message, burned into my mind. She hadn't just posted a picture of my building. She had given my exact location to my audience. The world! And someone had just used it to contact me, live, in front of 20,000 people. I slammed my hand on the keyboard, ending the stream, and dove for the front door to check the locks, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The moment I saw my address on that donation message, the fight changed. This was no longer a family squabble or a public relations nightmare. This was a direct, credible threat to my physical safety. My apartment, my fortress, my sanctuary had been breached. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant siren, every shadow in the hallway sent a jolt of pure terror through me. I was no longer just worried about my career. I was worried about my life. I paced my apartment for hours, peering through the blinds, convinced that at any moment some unhinged person would be at my door. The feeling of violation was absolute. She hadn't just attacked my reputation, she had dismantled my sense of security. In that state of fear-fueled clarity, I realized I couldn't handle this alone. The old Leo, the one who tried to handle everything himself, was gone. This was bigger than me. I made 2 phone calls. The first was to a friend, another streamer who had been in the game for longer than me. He was one of the few people in the industry I truly trusted. I laid out the entire story, from the dinner demand to the live doxing. He listened patiently, his initial shock turning into a quiet, simmering anger. He didn't just offer sympathy, he offered a strategy. He told me to document everything, to save every screenshot, every email, every hateful comment. He also gave me the name of a lawyer, a specialist in online harassment and defamation cases. The second call was to that lawyer. It was the most humbling and empowering call of my life. I explained the situation, my voice shaking. The lawyer was calm, professional, and immediately understood the gravity of what was happening. He explained that my mother's actions went far beyond simple mom drama. This was a coordinated campaign of harassment, tortious interference with my business contracts, and, with the doxing, a credible threat of harm. He told me to stop communicating with her or any family members immediately. He told me that we had a strong case for a restraining order and a civil lawsuit for damages. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. I wasn't powerless. I had options. The next few days were a blur of activity. My friend helped me secure my digital life. We enabled 2-factor authentication on every account, changed every password, and set up filters to block any messages containing keywords related to my address or my family. He also helped me draft a statement for my community, a vague but honest explanation that I was dealing with a serious and targeted campaign of online harassment and that I would be taking legal action. It was a way to get ahead of the narrative without revealing the whole sordid story. But as I gathered the evidence for the lawyer, screenshots of the Facebook posts, the emails from sponsors, the terrifying donation message, I felt a growing sense of frustration and anger. The legal route was slow, and in the meantime, my reputation was being shredded in the court of public opinion. My mother's narrative of the ungrateful son was still the dominant one.
The legal action would eventually shut her down, but it wouldn't repair the damage she had already done. I needed to fight back on the same battlefield she had chosen, the public square. That's when I made the most difficult decision of my life. I was going to go public, not with a vague statement, but with everything. I was going to make a video and tell my community the full, unvarnished truth. I was going to show them the evidence. It would mean airing the most painful, private details of my relationship with my mother. It would mean burning the bridge with my family to the ground, salting the earth, and dancing on the ashes. But as I looked at the mountain of evidence on my computer screen, I knew it was the only way. She had tried to destroy me by telling a story. I was going to save myself by telling the truth. I opened a new document, the blank page glowing on my screen, and I began to type. The title was simple and direct: The Truth About Why I Disappeared. Making that video was the hardest thing I've ever done. It wasn't the technical aspects. I could edit video in my sleep. It was the emotional excavation. For 3 days, I relived the entire saga. I recorded myself, sitting in a plain t-shirt in my living room, no flashy graphics, no intro music, just me and a camera. I spoke about the years of mockery, the constant belittlement, the feeling of being a disappointment in my own home. I read excerpts from old journal entries I'd found, entries from when I was a teenager, filled with the pain of her words. Then I laid out the timeline. I walked the viewer through the Sunday dinner, the demand for 50%, and my refusal. I didn't just tell them, I showed them. I put screenshots of her Facebook posts on the screen, the passive-aggressive captions, the pile-on from family members in the comments. I read the emails from my sponsors, redacting the names but leaving the corporate jargon and the clear implication of her interference intact. And then I addressed the doxing. I showed the picture of my apartment building, the one from the coffee shop. And then, with a deep breath, I showed the freeze frame of the donation message with my address. I didn't read it out loud. I just let it sit there on the screen, a stark, black and white testament to the malice of her actions. The tone of the video wasn't angry or vengeful. It was calm, measured, and deeply sad. I wasn't trying to get sympathy, I was trying to provide context. I was laying out a mountain of evidence and letting the community draw its own conclusions. At the end of the 20-minute video, I looked directly into the camera lens. I explained that I had filed for a restraining order and was pursuing legal action. I told my community that I understood if they were disappointed, but that I felt I owed them the truth. Then I thanked them for their support over the years and ended the video. I uploaded it with the title, "The Truth About Why I Disappeared," and scheduled it to go live at noon on a Tuesday. The 3 hours after the video went live were the longest of my life. I didn't look at the view count or the comments. I just sat on my couch, my stomach in knots, convinced I had just made the biggest mistake of my life. I had aired my family's dirty laundry for the world to see. What if they thought I was just as bad as she was? What if they saw it as a petty squabble between a mother and her son? Then my phone started buzzing. It was my friend, the other streamer. "Dude," he said, his voice filled with an energy I hadn't heard in weeks. "It's working. You need to look at Twitter." I hesitantly opened the app. The top trending topic in my country was a hashtag #StandWithLeo. Major influencers in the gaming community had watched the video and were sharing it, their captions filled with outrage and support. The narrative hadn't just flipped, it had been completely incinerated. I finally worked up the courage to look at the video's comment section. It was a sea of red hearts and messages of support. People were apologizing for ever doubting me. They were praising my courage. They were dissecting the evidence I'd presented and condemning my mother's actions in the strongest possible terms. The community had not only believed me, they had mobilized. And then they turned their attention to her. They found her public Facebook page, her LinkedIn profile, the small business she ran from home. The comment sections on her posts were flooded, not with hate, but with links to my video and simple, powerful messages like "Shame on you" and "We believe Leo." The tables had turned so completely, so swiftly, it was dizzying. She had tried to use the internet to destroy me, and the internet had risen up to defend me. I was watching her digital life be dismantled by the very community she had tried to turn against me. My phone rang again, an unknown number with the same area code as my hometown. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. The voice on the other end was hesitant, female, and young. "Leo," she said, "my name is Hannah. I'm your cousin, and I think you need to know what your mom is saying now." My cousin Hannah's voice was a mix of fear and resolve. She was my aunt's daughter, a few years younger than me, and we'd never been particularly close. But she, like many of the younger people in my family, saw the world differently than the older generation. She had seen my video and she was horrified. She told me that my mom was holding court with the family, spinning a new, even more delusional narrative. She wasn't denying what she'd done, she was bragging about it. She was telling everyone that she had taught me a lesson and put me in my place. She claimed the public backlash was just a sign of my toxic online influence, and that she was the victim of a smear campaign orchestrated by me. But then Hannah gave me the gift I didn't know I needed. She told me that my mom, in a fit of prideful stupidity, had been screenshotting her own emails to my sponsors and sending them in a family group chat as trophies of her victory. She was showing them off, boasting about how she'd taken that little brat down a peg. Hannah, seeing an opportunity, had taken screenshots of her own, screenshots of my mom's messages, where she openly admitted to contacting my sponsors, admitted to posting my information, and admitted her plan to ruin me. She sent the packet of images to me. It was the smoking gun. It was undeniable, direct proof of her malicious intent straight from her own hands. I forwarded the evidence to my lawyer immediately. His response was swift and decisive. This wasn't just about a restraining order anymore. This was ironclad evidence for a civil suit for tortious interference and defamation. With my cousin's testimony and these screenshots, the case was no longer he said, she said. It was a confession. My lawyer drafted a cease and desist letter that was a thing of brutal legal beauty.
It demanded she delete all posts, cease all contact, and stay away from me and my professional associates. It outlined in no uncertain terms the financial and legal consequences she would face if she failed to comply. It was served to her by a process server 2 days later. The combination of the massive public humiliation and the threat of crippling legal action finally broke her. The online rampage stopped. Her social media accounts went dark. The family gossip mill went silent. She had poked the bear, and the bear had not only fought back but had called in an entire army. The silence was its own form of victory. The road to rebuilding my career was long and humbling. I had meetings with the few sponsors who had stuck by me. I showed them the evidence, the video, everything. They were incredibly supportive. Then a funny thing happened. A few new, smaller companies reached out. They had seen the video and they weren't scared off by the drama. They were impressed by my honesty and resilience. They wanted to partner with someone who had weathered a storm and come out the other side stronger. I started streaming again, my first live stream since the doxing incident. The chat was a wall of positivity, a digital hug from 20,000 people. It felt like coming home. Today, things are different. I'm more successful than ever, but I'm also more cautious. I've learned hard lessons about trust and boundaries. I've had to mourn the relationship with my mother, not for what it was, but for what I wish it could have been. I've accepted that the person who was supposed to be my biggest cheerleader was my harshest critic, and that's a wound that may never fully heal. But in her attempt to ruin my life, she inadvertently gave me a gift. She forced me to find my own strength, to build my own chosen family of friends and a community that has my back. She wanted my money, but in the end, all she did was make sure I would never, ever be dependent on her again, in any sense of the word. She tried to destroy the career she hated, but she only ended up solidifying it, building it on a foundation so much stronger than I ever could have on my own. She wanted my life, and in a way, she got it. She just doesn't live in it anymore.